This is 8.4 day 2 notes. We're going to be talking about inverse of trig functions still. So yesterday we filled out this and we were kind of just talking about it, but now we're actually going to get into the practice of it. Okay, so it says evaluate each inverse trig function. Give your answer in both radians and degrees. So if we're looking here, I have cosine inverse of 1/2. So my range for cosine is going to be 0 to pi. So we're looking somewhere in the first or the second quadrant. So cosine being 1/2 is, if you look here on your unit circle, cosine being 1/2 is pi over 3 or 60 degrees. We really don't have to do any math because that does fall in our range, so we are good there. So I'm going to put pi over 3 and 60 degrees. Nice and simple. Okay, so then B, I have sine -1 being 2. This one is kind of a trick question. If you look at my sine, my domain of A, so this is the A value, has to be between -1 and 1. Since this is a 2, it is not in our domain, so there is no solution or whatnot, so you just put not in the domain. Okay, then we have C, sine inverse, so we are going to be looking at these values. I have -√2/2 for sine, so that is going to be at 7 pi over 4 and 315 degrees. So I have this being 7 pi over 4. Here's the issue though. 7 pi over 4 does not fall in my range of -pi to pi over 2. -pi over 2 over to pi over 2. So I'm going to have to do some algebra to get that to fall within that range. Okay, so we are going to find a coterminal angle. It is going to be, so since this is 0, this is pi over 2, this is -pi over 2. It's got to be in the negative, so between 0 and -pi over 2. So I'm actually going to subtract 2 pi. So we're finding a coterminal angle again. So when I subtract 2 pi, I get a -pi over 4. -pi over 4 does now fall in that range, so that would be my answer for that. Okay. You can do the same idea with my angle measurement. So I have 315. So I'm just going to put it right up here, 315, and then we're going to subtract the 360 to find the coterminal angle, which would equal -45 degrees. Okay. You could also think about it as we know pi over 4 is 45 degrees. Since it's a negative, it's going to be a negative here. Either way, it works just fine. Okay, so then we have cosine. So once again, we're up on one of these two quadrants. 0 is right here. That does fall in my range because my range is from 0 to pi. So I would have my radians be 0, and then my degrees would be 0 degrees. Okay, these will be on the homework, so you guys can be practicing on that. Okay, example 3. I have a group of hikers plan to walk from a campground to a lake. The lake is 2 miles east and 0.5 miles north of the campground. To the nearest degree, so we are in degrees, which I'm sure you guys like that better than radians. In what direction should the hikers head? First thing, I am hoping you guys know your directions. So north, east, south, and west. So what we're going to do, a group of hikers, we're gonna have to draw a triangle. A group of hikers plan to walk from the campground to a lake. So here's my campground. The lake is 2 miles east of the campground. Okay, so if I'm thinking here, if the lake is east, my lake is gonna be this way. So I'm just going to draw this and say 2 miles. It is also 0.5 miles north of the campground. So if this is my campground, I know I am going to be north, okay? But I had to walk 2 miles this way, and now I'm going to be north 0.5 miles. Okay, and then this is that lake. So we're just going to draw our triangle. I know that's going to be a right. And it says, in what direction should the hikers head? So the hikers are actually going to be walking on this line. So we need to figure out what this angle measurement is going to be. If you look at my theta, I know I have the opposite and I have the adjacent. So we're going to be using tangent. So just a reminder, SOHCAHTOA. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I have tangent. I don't know the angle measurement, so we're just going to have theta equaling opposite, so 0.5 over adjacent, so 2. Okay, so this is where it was a little bit different. Last lesson, we had one of these being the value we were trying to find. Now we are trying to find the angle measurement. Just a reminder, when we find angle measurement, we are trying to use the inverse. So I'm actually going to take the tangent inverse to both sides. Okay, if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side. Okay, these two cancel each other out. So they're kind of like reciprocals of each other. So I'm just going to have theta left over here, and then I'm going to have tangent inverse of 0.5 over 2. Okay, so if we have our calculators, goodness. Make sure you are in the correct mode, so you're going to press mode. Make sure we are working in degrees, so make sure your degrees is dark. Okay. Then we are going to press tangent inverse. So what you're going to do is press second, and then the tangent button. Okay, so now you should have tangent inverse pop up. We have 0.5 divided by 2. Then press enter. So if we're rounding, this is about 14 degrees. Okay, so I have theta equaling 14 degrees. So I know this is 14 degrees. What this is saying though, if I were to be looking east, we're gonna go north about 14 degrees. So it's going to be 14 degrees north of east. Okay, so I was looking at the east, and I'm gonna have to go 14 degrees north, so 14 degrees up, and that will get me to that lake. So then that is my answer. I want you guys to try B. I think the hard part is going to be drawing that picture. Just try your best and then check your answer when you are finished. Okay, so for B, we have an unusual rock formation is 1 mile east and 0.7 miles north of the lake. To the nearest degree, in what direction should the hikers head from the lake to reach the rock formation? So I have north, east, south, and west. Okay, so we're starting at the lake. So there's my little lake. The rock is 1 mile east. So if this is my lake, the rock is 1 mile east. So we're gonna draw 1 mile. And then it is north of the lake. So we know it's gonna be somewhere up here because it is north of that lake. And it is 0.75 miles. Draw the triangle, right angle. We're looking for this angle measurement. Okay, so once again, I do have the opposite and the adjacent, so we're going to be using tangent. Theta, because we don't know our angle measurement, is 0.75 over 1. To get rid of the tangent, to find what that theta is, we're going to use tangent inverse. So I'm going to have theta equaling tangent inverse of 0.75. 0.75 divided by 1, still 0.75. So once again, press second tangent inverse. Okay, so second tangent inverse, and then 0.75. And we should get, we'll say 37 degrees. Okay, so theta equals 37 degrees. Okay, so we're looking at the east, because the east is that straight line. And then we are going to be going north 37 degrees. So we're going to say 37 degrees north of east. Okay, we're actually going to stop here just because example 4 is kind of a little bit lengthier. So you guys can finish that one tomorrow.